movies. It is Thursday, April 29th. Amy LaJoie and Samir Roy here at your service.
Mm-hmm.
Happy Thursday, Samir.
Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday.
It's been a tough week. It's been a busy week of work. Yeah, I also just finished watching our movie from yesterday a little bit ago. So I'm still like I can't tell. I think my eyes do actually look a little bit puffy because I was crying. But yeah, no, it's been a tough week.
Well, we're getting through it. We're all getting through it together. We will be discussing our final installment of Movies About Movies for this month, going out with a bang. But before that, oh my God, wait, you know what just popped up, Samir?
What?
So I'm on Facebook. I'm sharing our video. On my Facebook memories, the thing that popped up from 9 years ago was the short film that you acted in for me when we were back at Cal, The Innocent Bystander.
Oh my God, that's right. And the only part I couldn't get right was the precious Volvo line. I still remember that. I just could not get it right. I couldn't get it. Everything else was like, okay, I guess, but I couldn't get that one. I gave you what I could. I'm sorry, Amy.
You know what? I am perfectly happy with your performance from 9 years ago. Yeah. Anywho, before Luke, I'll send you the link. It's on my Vimeo. I'll send it to you. But remind me, send me a message and I'll send it. It's definitely worth watching.
I still remember the part that I loved, like, because you edited it really well, so it got a lot of laughs when we saw it in the class, more than most of the other movies that tried to be funny. Like, your film got more laughs than the other ones. I remember that. But also, it was like he just ran in here, killed this guy, and stole my car or something like that.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun. Anywho, that just popped up.
That's so cute.
So let's talk about yesterday's film. Yesterday, we talked about West Side Story. We featured Rita Moreno, the EGOT, winning Best Supporting Actress for this film. I hadn't seen this in a long, long time. I didn't really have the best opinion of it before, and I will say it's only been slightly improved over that.
I still love it. I think one of the reasons I don't watch it as much is because the ending of it does always sting for me a lot. I don't know exactly why it stings so much more, but it was interesting that it came right after us watching Children of Men, where we saw that's a movie, like, part of that movie is really like the horror of how countries, as they grow more xenophobic, treat anybody who's coming in. And so this movie came along, like, right around the time that Puerto Rico actually did become part of the United States. And, a lot of Puerto Ricans did move into like the mainland.
Yeah.
And it really, like, I can say it soft pedals the racism to a certain extent. But at the same time, I watch this movie again now and I realize as a child, like, I didn't like the Jets when I was a kid. I did not like the Jets now. I don't think you're supposed to like the Jets. I think you're supposed to see them as a major part of the problem. And the scene that, one of the moments that was burned into my memory was the scene where Anita goes to try to warn them. She's basically trying to get a message to Tony for Maria, and the Jets basically almost rape her. And you see the terror in her face as she comes into that. Like, she knows that this is a possibility when she walks in there, and she's doing it because she is out of love for Maria, basically. And that, like, that moment, I was like, that's such a brave thing to put those kind of things, like, it's the racist cop that, like, they don't pretend that he's a good cop in any way.
No,
like, they put all these things in there that, like, I really identified with. It doesn't make heroes out of the white characters. They don't get some heroic moment where like now they've redeemed them. Like none of that happens for them.
Now.
You know, like it's stuff like that. Like it still burns really strongly because this movie also sort of is about that tension of like, what are you doing coming in here? Like this is our territory. This isn't just about gang territories. This is also about like white people thinking that the mainland of this country is their territory, that anybody with dark skin is not allowed to infiltrate in any way. And so that, you know, that I think that's probably the reason that my mother ended up always loving this movie after she married my dad, because she also saw how white people treated my dad. You know, she was part of a biracial marriage. And so this is like a love story about people who are not, you know, that all the systems of racism are keeping apart and it kills one of them. I guess maybe I also like that, at least in this version, like the woman doesn't have to die for the story to be tragic. It's the men who commit the violence who are the ones who end up dying. But also just from a filmmaking craft standpoint, like I can't think of any other movie that visualizes New York and the island of Manhattan the way the opening of this movie does. All those amazing overhead shots of the city. I've forgotten just how brilliant they were. And like you capture really the interesting labyrinthine network of streets and alleyways and fences. Like all of it's visually established so well. I think visually it's just still stunning. I think my image of first love from this movie is still how I imagine it to be when you meet that special someone. Things like that will live in me for a long time.
Okay. These are things I did enjoy. I did like the plot. You know, we mentioned yesterday that this is basically Romeo and Juliet without Juliet dying.
Yeah.
I did enjoy the plot. I enjoyed the cinematography. I did like the music. I recognized more songs from it than I thought I would. The big problem for me with this movie was just, and I think it's just this movie. I haven't seen this performed on stage. I haven't, you know, I will be seeing the Steven Spielberg remake, but the cheesiness of the acting in this, Rita Moreno was hands down the best actor in this. Everything else, we were like laughing at. It reminded me of Grease 2 in a bad way. And you know how I love Grease 2, but Grease 2 is Grease 2, and that's like, you know, campy. But as soon as like the Jets were just, it was like there was nothing about them that I was just like, I do not feel threatened. Like, this is a gang. I do not feel threatened by this gang at all. I couldn't get past Natalie Wood and her like Puerto Rican accent. Although her actual acting was decent, I could not get around that. And
I was thinking the same thing. I guess I probably would have been more offended if they just had her talking like a white person pretending to be Puerto Rican. They already have, I mean, granted, they at least did not put her in brown face because that is her natural skin tone that you see in the film. You know, she's always had that skin tone. That's what she looks like. So they didn't try to make her look Puerto Rican in any way except maybe like the hairstyling and the you know, subtleties of the makeup. But I personally was not turned off. I understand some people. Usually it's common amongst people who don't really like musicals, who see people singing and dancing and they can't take it seriously because they're like, well, what am I supposed to feel? This doesn't make sense. They're dancing, you know, so this one is challenging a little more because this is supposed to be a gang and they're singing and dancing. And so that is really where...
There's a way to do it that's not...
I don't think there is, actually.
I just had a problem with that. The choreography and the dancing was phenomenal. That was certainly really enjoyable to watch. But I am really curious to see if in this remake they're going to add that toughness to this, because
I'll tell you one thing what they're going to do. To add toughness, they're going to take out a lot of the dancing. That's what's going to happen. Because there's no way for you to combine that dance with like, oh, I'm going to be like, it's kind of like expecting like a ballet dancer to be like, I need you to be gruff and tough. And it's like, sorry, that's not
it
That's
was
not possible.
a lot of it was the dialogue, which I don't know how much they can change, especially with the lyrics. And I understand this is from the early '60s, and I
Mhm.
certainly enjoy lots of musicals where they're like, "Come on, gang! Like, let's whatever they're doing." And but taking that chipperness, but then adding it to like the Jets, I was just like, I like these men just need to be not even men, these boys. These boys just need to be
Well, they are boys. That's
like,
also the thing, is that they're technically
yeah,
not actually threatening. Like when you get to the points where they actually start doing something
yeah, he's
violent,
doing a candy store.
they're surprised, they're shocked by it. They're not expecting, they've never killed anyone. So when
Yeah,
someone actually dies, their response is like, "Oh my God, what have we done?" Because that's not really who they are. It's all an act to begin with, which is what every kid's persona really is. It's an act. This is the act that these kids have chosen, and that's what
mhm.
unites them. But like a real gang of kids is not gonna always be like Class of 1984. I actually just watched that yesterday also. I don't know why, but I think it's because I was watching The Last Driving with Joe Bob Briggs. But that's a movie about like a high school gang, and they're really rough. There's no dancing in it. Obviously, it's not a musical.
Yeah.
But that is a picture of a rough urban gang that goes way, way over the top in its violence. So it's like I actually got two pictures of how we depict gang violence and gangs in movies, and it's like in that movie the high school kids are very dangerous and extremely violent and actually
Mhm.
kill and maim, and it's really bad, and actually rape people in that story. So I was like, there is that problem with this musical for some people where it's like, okay, these are like urban realities that you've tried to tell through the lens of a musical. But at the
Mhm.
same time, I was always like, I really loved all the dancing in it, and with the gang, because it gave me a different picture of what guys could do. I was like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
so like that's cool. But
the
also
dancing and,
the
the
mixture of,
acrobatics. The one guy's like
I
a
think that's
gymnast.
why Russ Tamblyn does some gymnastics moves, because he was a gymnast also. And
Yeah.
so there's an element of like we're throwing in things that show you something. It's showing you something that needs a heightened physical ability. You need to have
Mhm.
some sort of physical strength to do these kind of things. And I'm thinking maybe that's where they felt like that's how we'll try to differentiate it and introduce some element that shows that these guys are tough and they are strong. They're street kids or whatever. But I also my mind when it's watching a musical understands intrinsically, like, this is a musical. I'm going to see singing and dancing. I'm going to see characters expressing things through dance and song. And so I was never as turned off by that in the film. I was more noticing how much tanning makeup they added to George Chakiris
Oh
as
god, that's
Bernardo in this
amazing.
film, which is the thing that I was a little like, George Chakiris is already, his natural skin tone is pretty close to Natalie Wood's.
Yeah,
So
that
I'm
was
like,
one of the main reasons why I looked him up, because I was like, he definitely has makeup on.
yeah,
Like,
no, he's
what is
Greek.
his
You can
nationality?
tell
Yeah.
by his name that he's Greek. But yeah, he's Greek. He's not Puerto Rican, and I just didn't understand why they felt the need to make him look darker. I'm like, well, his natural skin tone would match the other actor you have playing his sister. So why couldn't he just, I don't know, maybe, I don't know. I can't
Yeah,
imagine why they did it. It was mostly not too jarring, but there are scenes where you can tell, like, after they've been dancing a bunch and there's been some physical contact between the actors, that like the makeup is a little smudged
mm,
and doesn't look so good in this moment, but
little
I guess he didn't
petty.
have time to reapply
Yeah. Uh,
before this close-up shot of him. So that always is like, so I'm sure that's something that's going to be fixed in the remake. They're not going to have anybody who's not at least a Latin actor or
oh,
Latino
yeah.
actor playing the character. Also, but at the same time, George Chakiris is also somebody who is like a legend in musical theater. And so he's also somebody who had the exact right build and dance ability for that role. So that's probably why they cast him. Because he is such an icon of American musical theater that when the director Jacques Demy made The Young Girls of Rochefort later in the 60s, and he wanted to bring in American musical theater and American musical film people that would be recognizable. He brought George Chakiris and Gene Kelly into his film, into this French musical that does kind of this. It's not gangs, but it's also like that musical has a story about an axe murderer on the loose. And there's, but it's a fun, frothy musical. There just happens to be a murderer subplot in it. Kind of, it's weird, but that's how legendary he is as a musical performer. So I think he was considered a big get for this movie. That it wasn't just like, oh, we just took whoever we could. It was like, no, he's the best. We want the best in this movie. We need him for this movie. And so that was more, it was more about that and less like, well, you know, I guess we can give him some makeup. He'll do, you know. So there was a real reason beyond his ethnicity that he was chosen. It would just have been nice if they could have found someone that they didn't have to paint to look Puerto Rican. I mean, also Rita Moreno is also Puerto Rican, and I'm wondering if maybe the fact that she already had sort of a pedigree in Hollywood, that it was easy for them to cast her in this movie, because I don't think that her national or her ethnicity would have instantly made her a choice for it. But I don't remember if she was in the stage version of this, though. Did you find that in the info?
I don't remember. I don't think so. I don't remember seeing that in there. But yeah, this movie, I am glad I saw it. Again, love certainly things I did love about it, and some things that I was just, yeah. And I
it's mentioning In the Heights.
Yeah, that's coming out this year too. I didn't even think it was slow. I mean, this is like a 2.5 hour movie.
I was surprised.
The pacing was great. I mean, so again, there were things, but
I forgot that it was that long.
I'm hoping this new version, I'm really curious to see what they do with it, and let's see what the cheesiness factor is.
I don't see. Here's the thing: I didn't find the movie cheesy, so I don't agree there, and I'm pretty sure that this new version is going to.
Like, you got it, Daddy-O.
That's just like, I mean,
there was
I know maybe because my mom.
Like, she says something to him, and he's just like, "See," like we like busted out laughing. I know,
but it's funny. But people did say things like those aren't just like things they made up for the movie. Those are things that like people actually said. So you would probably laugh at someone.
My final word on that subject is I watched this with my mom, and she made a comment, and she just said, you know, she's in her 60s, and she said, you know, even by 1960 standards, this was pretty cheesy.
Right, but this was 1961, and you know, my mother was actually, how old was she? She was 10 years old when this movie came out in theaters. So she was old enough to actually go and see it in the theater with audiences and remember the experience. And nobody reacted that way to those lines. So it's like, it's really just relative to other people's experiences, I suppose. I don't see how they're really going to make a remake and set it in the early 50s and 60s and then just have everybody speaking in modern parlance as if there was no slang in New York City. So they're going to have to reckon with that in some way. And we'll see how they do that. I don't necessarily trust Steven Spielberg's ability to work with a choreographer and film dance. So I'm pretty sure that a lot of the dance is going to be obscured in this remake, and that's gonna make the movie a big fail for me. That's my expectation of Steven Spielberg's version. It'll be nice, like I said, it'll be nice to have a cast that's mostly Puerto Rican and Latino, and not anybody else filling in. But I do not have high hopes for that adaptation. I think this movie deserved its 10 Oscars. I think when I watched it, it reminded me of how much a movie has to work to like incorporate music into a film. Like, it makes sense when you think like, okay, well, what kind of movie would be ideal to win the Oscar for costumes and music and sound and cinematography and those kind of things? It's like, oh, well, those things, like, you need an sort of heightened ability with those skills to make a really good musical, because it's very difficult to coordinate all of the action and the music and make it seamless. So this was a huge production that Hollywood spent a big amount of money on. It was basically their way of saying, welcome, Puerto Rico, to the United States. And, I guess considering how life has turned out since then, we'll see how much Puerto Rico thanks us for that.
Well, if you didn't see West Side Story, it's available on Prime right now. Definitely be sure to see it if you are planning on seeing this upcoming remake. Yeah. Alrighty. It's time for Name That Movie. And this first one, I think, is very appropriate for today, given that this is our final movie about Movies Day. And this is, Samir's going to know what this is before I even show it. This is a movie that I desperately wanted to include for this month. However, I technically already talked about it like the first week of me doing this, and it didn't win any Oscars. So here we go. And I could get this from any one of these things. Here we go.
I'm sure you could, Amy.
Yep. So go ahead and type it in the comments.
And Theodoro Crystal, I did love West Side Story again. Yeah, this one I knew just from your description, Amy, just from you saying that you talked about the first week.
Yep.
How I remember.
To me, this is the ultimate movie about movies, or at least a certain part. An era. All right, let's type in the comments here. I'm going to get real angry if you guys mess this one up. Yes, Luke, singing in the rain.
Luke got it. There you go.
Thank God. Yes. I'm singing in the rain. Yes, that's my all-time favorite movie. It makes me so happy all the time. But now for something completely different for our second one.
No clues?
I shockingly still have not seen this movie. That's the clue.
You have not seen this movie.
I have not. Well, we have talked about this director many times.
Oh, maybe I do know what this is. What does the newspaper say? I can't see it.
It says phew. And it says hazy, hot, humid, and headed toward 100 degrees.
Okay. Then maybe I don't know it. Or maybe I do. Well, obviously, it's a New York movie.
Mm-hmm.
Wait a minute. What do you mean you haven't seen this?
I have not seen this.
I thought you talked about this movie.
Mm-mm.
Really?
I have never seen this movie.
Okay, it must not be the movie I think it is.
This movie, no, not Dog Day Afternoon. This movie really put this director on the map.
Well, got them their first big Oscar nominations, I think.
Mm-hmm. But
because they'd had a hit comedy a few years before that did not get nominations like this. Did not get this kind of attention.
Any takers?
I'm sure somebody knows it.
Walter, are you out there?
I haven't seen Walter comment. I think Walter would know it right away also. That last image is the one I think that, I mean, the heat, the temperature on the front page with the bed-stuy and the trash can through Sal's window.
No, it's not the producers.
Definitely not the producer. We just watched a musical about racism, basically, and this is another movie set in New York about racism.
Yep.
Between different groups, set in the made in the late 80s.
You want to say what it is?
I'm gonna say This is a Spike Lee film. Something about doing the correct thing. Do the right thing. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I knew what it was, but I was like pretending like I couldn't remember the word right. But yeah, no, that's Do the Right Thing. I got blocked on Twitter for calling someone out for a discussion about that movie, and they admitted that they hadn't actually seen it.
That's right.
And I'm like, but you're going to have an argument about it, even though okay.
People on the internet. Cool. Well, we'll do more of that tomorrow.
Oh, son of a damn it.
Let's move on to our final movie about movies selection. We've done The Bad and the Beautiful. We've done 8.5. We've done Birdman. We've done Adaptation. And our fifth and final film for this is Tim Burton's Ed Wood. This movie came out in 1994. Ambitious but troubled movie director Edward D. Wood Jr. tries his best to fulfill his dreams despite his lack of talent. This won Best Supporting Actor for Martin Landau and Best Makeup. Samir, what can you tell us about Ed Wood? Like, not the movie, but the person.
The person. Well, he became famously associated with one of the films, Plan 9 from Outer Space, because a lot of people sort of refer to it as like the worst movie ever made. And that sort of gained him some notoriety that enabled, some theater owners to actually take other films that he would make. But he was like, he had like no money. He had really nothing but a desire to tell stories in movie form. He just didn't really have the training necessary to be great at it. But he also became famous for the movie Glen or Glenda, which was scandalous at the time because it broached the topic of men who liked to dress in women's clothes, not because of a gender dysphoria thing. He just enjoyed wearing women's clothes and would feel more comfortable in them. And so he actually made a movie about it but it was called Glen or Glenda, which actually sort of is more about transsexualism than the title suggests transsexualism more than transvestism. But those were like the movies that were like that upon which his name lives today. And it's kind of sad to see people go back to something like Plan 9 from Outer Space and talk about it being such a terrible movie. It's really just a really low budget movie, and he just wasn't quite as good at hiding the low budget aspects of the film. The stories are no worse than any Hollywood monster movie or alien movie, and he sort of gathered this ragtag bunch of people who were sort of on the outskirts of the Hollywood system, like Vampira, who was a famous television movie horror host that basically Elvira stole her whole career from. Vampira was doing it long before Elvira ever did it. And that was her gig, her look, everything was completely stolen. But she was one of these people that was sort of on the outskirts and was in with the cool people in Hollywood, the other sort of outskirt people like James Dean, who didn't fit in with the status quo in a way, but was being marketed like crazy. She was friends with Anthony Perkins and a lot of other artsy character actor type people. And then, of course, Bela Lugosi, who was completely out of Hollywood pictures by the time he hooked up with Ed Wood. And there's like that relationship in this movie is probably like the beating heart of the film, of this movie. Because I think this movie does really well is it does not condescend. It does not invite you to laugh at Ed Wood. It invites you to be inspired and enchanted by his energy and his pure love for telling stories and pure love for movies. Like you are kind of admiring him as the ideal filmmaker, like someone you should aspire to be when you get set behind a camera or you get on a film set. If you have the energy and enthusiasm for art and filmmaking that this person does, then that's the kind of thing that they always tell you should have, is he has in spades. And so this movie really respects him in a way that I think the culture did not respect him before this movie. People thought he was an easy joke to laugh at. Interesting side note, when this movie, there was a special edition of this movie released on DVD, back when it was DVD, there was no Blu-ray. And the special edition of the DVD, we were all really, me and other film people were really excited. Of course, other Tim Burton fans were super excited that this special edition was coming out, because I think the other DVD that was released was just the movie. It was one of those DVDs that had just the movie and like a trailer and no special features. Well, this one had a ton of special features. We were like, oh my God, I can't wait. Like we were going to pre-order it, and I worked at Borders at the time, so it was going to come in stock and I was going to pull one aside. And then that Tuesday came, and our shipment of those movies never arrived. All our copies of Ed Wood didn't arrive in the box. And we were like, why didn't we get these? And then like a box did finally arrive that had them. And then instantly my manager took them away. He said, oh no, the distributor said we have to send all these back. This DVD is being recalled. And we're like, but we waited like a year for this DVD. Like we were so mad. I'm like, well, when is it coming out? And then they were like, we don't know when the new date is. We were just told that these have been recalled. We have to send them all back. So they wouldn't let me buy one. And meanwhile, my friend who worked with us in the music and video department at Borders was at Target, because that's where he would get his that was where he would get his new releases on Tuesdays. Because that's when all new DVD and albums come out, was Tuesday was the release day. So he was at Target because he would get them cheaper there, even cheaper than his discount at Borders would have given him. And so he's like, oh, I'm here at Target. He calls me and he's like, Smear, they haven't pulled Ed Wood from the shelves here. They're sitting out here. I'm like, do you want me to get you one? I'm like, yes, get me one right now. And so he does, and he buys it for me, brings it back to me, and I'm like, oh, this is great. And there was still no news yet that day on why that DVD didn't come out. But I still got one of these ones that was supposed to be recalled, and I never sent it back. I still have it to this day.
I wonder what the reason was.
I found out what the reason was. On the special edition of that was initially supposed to go out, I still have it. There's a short documentary feature on cross-dressing and Ed Wood's history of cross-dressing. The new special edition that finally came out, that was the only thing that wasn't there. Everything else that was on the DVD before was there. The only thing they removed was that one thing. And they didn't tell anybody that they did that. It was just that when they finally did release it, people who had found a way to get the first one, bought the second one and looked at it, and they're like, So it's like interesting. Like even the people who released the movie didn't want that part of the story acknowledged. And Tim Burton is like, well, like that's in this movie. That's part of who this person is. It's a big part of his life.
It's on the poster.
It's on the poster. Like they didn't want to discuss it, so they just
very weird.
Excised that little feature, and it's only like 5 or 6 minutes long. And I went through periods where I was really down. You know how I got through college when I needed food or medicine or medical care. I would sell my most priceless DVDs off. I could not get rid of that one. Something held me back from selling it every time. I just could never get rid of it. Kind of like the Red Shoes or Peeping Tom. And I'm like, I can't replace this. Like, it's going to be really hard to replace this. Maybe it won't be, but I don't want to take the risk of this kind of now special thing that I have, like not being available to me in the future if I got rid of it now. So I never sold it. But it was interesting, like this sort of like washing out of like anything that even resembles like a trans storyline. Even though this is not a trans character, he's just a man who likes to dress in women's clothes. It's crazy. It was crazy to me, but that was it was one of those things that you could tell, like, oh, so the studio was never comfortable with this aspect of the story, and Tim Burton really had to fight to keep it in there. It's crazy to me because I'm like, you watch the movie, and the movie you can't tell that there was any effort to get anything taken out of this film. It is it's one of my favorite Tim Burton movies.
It's Tim Burton's favorite Tim Burton movie too, apparently.
I can understand why. You can tell there's a lot of love in this movie. There's a lot of love for Ed Wood shown in this movie. And I love, of course, his idol is like Orson Welles. And there's a whole plot about that in the movie of him, like really, really wanting to meet Orson Welles. And I think anybody who loves movies, there's going to be things that will just make you smile in this film. Yeah. Like you've ever tried to make a movie yourself, like the moment that makes me laugh the most is when he's like trying to direct Bela Lugosi. He's like, okay, like you're in the swamp and the tentacles, you're fighting with this creature. And it's just like these like things lying in this pallid, shallow pool in this area where they're filming, and he's like, oh yeah, like they don't work, they're not animatronic. So Bela Lugosi has to like flop around and like grab these tentacles and make it look like this thing is trying to eat him kind of moment. And you're seeing him make this, and you're not looking at it, you're not laughing because you're like, oh, they don't know what they're doing. It's like, this is what you have to do when you have no money and you have a vision and you're like, you know what, I'm just gonna go for it. It's just what we're doing. We're gonna do it. And it just like it, I don't know why it makes my heart burst with happiness every time I watch it, but also just the Bela Lugosi storyline breaks my heart so completely every time I watch this movie. It's just so incredible. Like he won an Oscar for this performance.
Yeah, I love Martin Landau. I was just reading that Tim Burton really viewed this as like Ed Wood and Bela Lugosi's relationship was kind of like Tim Burton and Vincent Price.
Yes. Like someone who was an icon and that Hollywood basically just cast aside when they weren't marketable anymore. Yeah, and the depiction of Bela Lugosi as someone who he just wanted so badly to work. He loved working in movies, and just the pain of being cast aside that way. And he was really like exploited by, he got paid very little money for doing Dracula, like one of the most famous performances in horror film or studio film history. He got paid almost nothing for that movie, like so little. And it's just because he didn't know, he was pretty new to Hollywood, and he's like, oh, just pay me what I got for the last picture, which was like next to nothing. He wasn't really respected as much as Boris Karloff was, for instance. And there's a whole thing about that in here. Like he's very bitter about how Boris Karloff's career just kept going and his didn't. But yeah, there's just moments in this movie where Martin Landau will it makes you see, there's a moment in one of Ed Wood's films, and it's like the last thing that was ever filmed of Bela Lugosi. And it doesn't make any sense in the context of the picture. So when you watch the movie that it's in, you're like, this scene makes no sense. What does he do? It's so stupid. What a terrible director. He doesn't know what's going on. This doesn't make any sense here. And then you see how and why that scene came to be. And it shuts you the fuck up right away if you ever thought you were above that movie or above Ed Wood in some way, or you were like, you thought you could dunk on it. It's like, it is like gonna puncture that self-satisfied balloon of condescension that some people have for Ed Wood, and that particular scene. So it's I know it's gonna break my heart again. I just know it will. But there's so much joy and fun in this movie too, that I think everybody will still have a good time. But still pack your tissues.
Yeah, it's been years since I've seen this. I'm really looking forward to watching it again. Unfortunately, it's only available to rent. We had a good streak going, but you gotta rent this one. Sorry.
I know.
Unless you own a super rare special edition DVD of it, like Smear does. But yeah, please watch Ed Wood. Hope you enjoy this movie. Join us tomorrow as we discuss Ed Wood after watching it. Tomorrow is the last day of the month of April for us. We are going out with another double feature. We're back to double features. Tomorrow is going to be highlighting achievements in costume design. We have quite the pair. We have the 1950s Sabrina with Audrey Hepburn, and then we have the Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, which is just a party. It's a film version of a party.
It's a really great contrast in costuming styles. Crystal remembers when that stage version of Priscilla, Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert came to the Orpheum. I only got to see part of it. I forgot why I wasn't able to work all of that show, but I got to see parts of it. Oh, that's another one. If that show ever tours again, go see that show. If you have a chance, you will love it.
That's a movie. So excited. So we'll be going out on a fun note for this month, tomorrow is also special because we'll be doing our May calendar reveal. It's gonna be exciting and very different from anything else that we've done before.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you will there will be a noticeable difference right off the bat. But thank you guys so much for watching today. Please enjoy Ed Wood, again available to rent. Please check out our Patreon. Put the link in the comments. We'll see you guys tomorrow.